I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. This time round I want to talk about Mario Bava's Baron Blood. Long-time viewers will know how much I love Italian horror cinema, but I've got a bit of a blind spot where Mario Bava is concerned. I've seen Bay of Blood and Black Sabbath and loved both of them and thought it was time to check out another one, Baron Blood. And this turned out to be a bit of an odd fish of a film. It concerns a young American man who is travelling for the first time to Germany to go and visit the ancestral home of his parents, who are both German immigrants, and there he meets his uncle for the first time, and he's more than a little intrigued about tales of his family tree. He's a direct descendant of, let me get the name right, Baron Otto von Kleist from that area, who in medieval times was a sort of Elizabeth Bathory figure from the castle. He used to torture and murder all the peasants there, and he is given a stern warning at the airport from his uncle, although this might be some titillating bit of family history for him. Don't mention the Baron's name in front of the locals, because for them it is a very real history and the people the Baron killed were real people. On the way back to the uncle's house, Uncle asks if he wants to stop off and check out the Baron's old castle. Well, of course he does. And once we get there, we find that the castle has been bought by someone who is renovating it with the intention of turning it into a hotel, but not a hotel for any of the locals, a hotel specifically to cater for people like this young American guy who want to live in the surroundings of something with such a bloody history. He's even renovating the torture dungeon at the bottom of the castle with torture implement replicas and stuff like that. So I guess imagine a holiday company letting you stay in Vlad the Impaler's castle and having dummy bodies on spikes all around the place. That kind of sort of distasteful commodifying of the past. We find out, though, that one of the people the Baron sentenced to death was actually a witch, and this young guy has actually got from his father's papers the curse the witch put on the Baron, and also a spell to resurrect him and a spell to send him back to the grave. It doesn't take a novice horror fan even to realise what's going to happen. The spell is going to be read, the Baron is going to be resurrected. Shenanigans happen, which mean they can't send him back to the grave, and that is essentially Baron Blood. And in lesser hands, the film would probably have been a complete write-off. In Bava's hands, there is enough here to recommend it, but this is certainly a strange and perhaps lesser film compared to what I've seen before, Bay of Blood and Black Sabbath, or perhaps it just has a slightly different audience. The liner notes for the Arrow Blu-ray that I got do note strong similarities between this, released in 1972, and Hammer's Dracula AD 1972. Both very much taking old school, gothic, trad horrors and transplanting them into the clearly established and obviously modern world. I guess my frustration with Baron Blood is that there's so much there that is undercooked and underdeveloped in the script that I can just see that there's a meatier film to be had. You have this young American man's clear obsession with the bloody past of his family, and he's so eager and so keen to resurrect the Baron that you do think, well, hey, something's got to be up with that. And that doesn't develop. There's this notion, as I mentioned earlier, of commodifying the past, a sort of sanitized recreation of the past, and then later on in the film, that dungeon of replicas has those torture devices put to their intended use and becomes an actual torture dungeon again. So there's perhaps something there that the film could have dug a little deeper into about the real warts and all history versus a sanitized modern version of it or trying to commodify it. There's very clearly a subtext here with horrors from the past coming back to haunt the present, that you can't help but feel that there's a subtext about Hitler and about the rise of the Nazi Party, which would have been recent history at the time the film was released. But again, none of this ever bubbles up to the surface and becomes anything. Instead, what you get is the Baron with his disfigured face, broad hat and cloak and hunched, shuffling motions, looking for all the world like a traditional universal classic monster, a sort of Phantom of the Opera type figure shuffling around this foggy town, picking off people one by one. And it's a fairly bloodless affair. It's a 15 certificate movie here in the UK, but I would suggest that if you've got a 12 or 13-year-old who likes their horror and is really trying to push beyond the envelope of the age appropriate stuff into something a little more scary, something like Baron Blood might actually fit the bill rather nicely. It does have a kind of Scooby-Doo vibe to it, so much so with the Baron's sort of rubber mask of a disfigured face that I was expecting the mask to be pulled off to reveal perhaps that nothing supernatural was going on at all, and it was someone pretending to be the resurrected Baron, and that there was a human agency behind it all along. So it has less bite than I was personally hoping for. Maybe if I return to it knowing what to expect and meeting the film on its own standards, I might enjoy it more a second time round. But it is directed by Mario Bava, so there is more than just that to recommend it. Bava famously was afraid of travelling, but for this production his producer insisted that it was shot in Germany, so he had to travel, and it was a location had to be found rather than him filming on sets, which is his comfort zone. And once they get into the castle and onto the real living sets, the visuals of the film start to sing. You can really see that Bava had his background as a painter and as a cinematographer. Oh my, the way everything looks. Once they get out of the airport, the way everything looks is drippingly gorgeous, painted with light, all of this kind of stuff that everyone says about Mario Bava, all of it. It's all true. And then in the classic spooky castle tradition, there's a hidden room, and when they go into it, it's dripping with cobwebs. And then something sincerely sinister, they find an old portrait of the Baron that's been slashed across, but leaving two eyes piercing out of the dark. And when he does something very strange, and it's very spooky when they peer closer at it. The close-up of the painting is not the close-up of the painting. There are real eyes. It's either someone's eyes or some glass eyes poking through holes cut in a canvas. It just looks so uncanny and strange, and you see it for a second, and then he sort of pulls out and everything becomes all unfocused. This film is full of Bava's flourishes like that. The camera is always moving, pushing in on something, or starting in an extreme close-up and pulling out, or pulling out of focus, or starting out of focus and then moving in to focus on something else. His restless camera is in full evidence here. And there is a chase in the fog, which is an absolutely masterful set piece. In other hands, it could have been dull and probably even really quite funny, because these are clearly just bits of a street and bits of set that they've filled with dry ice and people running in and out of the shots and round corners and stuff like that. In Bava's hands and in the editing suite, this turns into a dizzy, disorientating, really dreamlike chase. Some locations get replicated, and we see them again 2 or 3 times, and so this chase is sort of like circular, like a dream chase, and you keep looping through the fog back round, and suddenly you're at the same place again. Wonderful. With the little section where the Baron starts to knock people off one by one, it's very easy to see how Italian horror cinema seeded the American slasher subgenre once again. I mean, it's beyond doubt at this point, surely. I think now actually I'm talking myself perhaps into liking it more than I initially did. When the film ended, I was sort of like, that was a bit curious. It doesn't reach the highs of Bay of Blood, and it doesn't reach the highs of Black Sabbath, which is one of my favourite Italian horror movies of all time. That film is practically peerless. It sits in an odd place, and I haven't seen enough Bava to know where it sits in his wider horror canon, let alone his wider movie canon. But what I did straight after watching this, because I was so keyed up to watch a Bava film and was a little, straight after that, the next day, I watched another Bava film, which I want to talk about next time, and I stuck on Planet of the Vampires.